Welcome everyone to another disjointed Traction E-Rag live conversation. Did you enjoy the chickens, Paul?
Yeah, I was actually thinking that was chicken roost.
yeah. If you are joining us today, I am with a gentleman named Paul Hallett. We've known Paul for 5 or 6 years, and Paul was an early customer in Woods Runners, one of the first events we've ever put on, way up in northern Quebec. And Paul, why did you join us? I have no idea why you decided to take that leap.
I was just kind of looking for stuff that was a bit different, but Ontario, as you know, is very flat. The hills out there looked amazing. I saw the first iteration you did of that, and it looked amazing. So I signed up for it. I thought there's a bunch of people going to go from my riding circle, and then, as it happens, people didn't, and they dropped out. And then you introduced me to Steve Waycamp, who I'd never met. Then I ended up driving for 16 hours with him in his truck down to Gaspé, which was a bit of a gamble, but actually, what a great guy, and we've remained friends ever since. So yeah, it was a great trip.
Right. Yeah, I forget how all that comes together because it's such a blur on our end. Like, it's just, people arriving from all over, and it's amazing. But yeah, I'm so, like, I met you for the first time, and it always impresses me when guys sign up just by themselves with no riding buddies, and they just show up cold, not knowing anyone. I love it because it represents courage.
Yeah, it's a bit of a theme, throwing myself in at the deep end, which sometimes works. Sometimes,
yeah, we're going to talk about that very concept. So let me first, Paul, let me tell everyone sort of who you are and why they should care, or why I think they should. Paul represents everyman or average man. And average in the sense of his dirt riding career, because of course that's what we're here to talk about. Like you and me, whoever's out there listening, he's a trail rider. I don't think you have an extensive racing background. Is that true, Paul?
No, not at all. The first race I ever did was 10 years. I guess it must be nearly 10 years ago, but it was, or maybe not quite that long ago. But it was, later on in my riding career, and a buddy and I decided, hey, let's go and do the Cord.
Right.
Which
so
again,
if you're listening,
jumping in at
Quarter Enduro, Canada's toughest race, arguably. Lots of people will argue that, but it's a sort of a famous race in Ontario. But Paul represents an average trail rider, weekend warrior, and the reason we're talking to him today is because he just completed Romaniacs. And not only did he complete Romaniacs, he completed Romaniacs in the bronze class. And anyone who knows anything about Romaniacs realizes that for a recreational trail rider, someone who's not a pro or doesn't do this for a living, completing bronze is a significant accomplishment. So that's why I think you care. I find it a fascinating story. I'm always fascinated how average people end up partaking in Romaniacs, because it's really, for dirt bikers, for off-road guys, it's one of the pinnacles. It's, Erzberg, Romaniacs, and I would say Paris to Dakar, but that's slightly different. That's more rally. But everyone knows, every off-road rider knows about Romaniacs. Paul finished it. So we're going to explore that today. We're going to talk about sort of where Paul came from, what his background was, why he's an average man, and then sort of like, how did it possibly end up that he completed Romaniacs? If you're interested, we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask Paul about financing. What's it cost? What does it really look like? Do you have to train at all? Can anyone complete it? Is it just a fake difficult event? So anyway, we'll get into it. So Paul, let's welcome. Thank you for joining us, because I find these fascinating.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I'm honored.
Yeah, man. So let's get right into it. I am always curious about people and their dirt riding experience. So like, rewind us to first time you've ever been on a dirt bike. Like, how did that happen? Like, what's your pedigree?
So I was thinking about this actually, and the first time I ever rode a dirt bike was I was out for a walk with my parents in the countryside when I was about, I mean, 4, 5 or 6, really small. And we were walking through this field, and I saw a little kid about my age ripping around on a little automatic bike, and I just was transfixed. I didn't know that that was that sort of thing you could do, and I just stood there and I was gobsmacked. And the parents of this little kid, my parents were trying to drag me away, and I just wanted to watch. The parents of that little rider came across and said, "Hey, do you want to go?" And they let me ride. And I rode around this field, not very big, I guess, and that was it. I was just hooked, and I didn't get my own bike for another maybe 10 years after that. But I was just a bike fan. I rode bicycles like a dirt bike. Pretended I was on a dirt bike. And then eventually I managed to save up some money and got my first bike when I was about 14 or 15. And it started from then. And I've always had a motorbike of some sort since then.
And have you had a motorcycle since you were 14, 15 all the way through, or did you take the classic break for education and family and all that stuff?
I've always had a bike, but it hasn't always been a dirt bike. So when I was 16 and I needed transport to get myself around, I had a road bike. And I kind of dabbled in dirt bikes, but I had road bikes as my primary form of transport because I was living in England at the time, and you can ride a dirt bike all year round. So I did. And I didn't have a car for a long time, not till I was kind of mid-20s. So everything was done on a bike. But yeah, so the dirt biking, that's where it started. It kind of went across the road, and then it came back to dirt. And I don't own a road bike anymore. It's just dirt bikes.
And you don't sound Canadian to me. Because
Really?
of course, you guys don't know, Paul is actually in Canada. Where are you based out of? Ontario?
Yeah, I'm about an hour north of Toronto, or Toronto.
Right. So Paul's a Canadian, believe it or not. But how did you end up here? And did your motorcycle follow you?
Well, actually, when I left England, I came across, I was in the British Army, and there was a military exchange going on. So you could come over to Canada for 2 years, and the Canadian Army sent someone across to the UK for 2 years. So I actually sold my bikes in the UK and came across for 2 years back in 2006. And the guy I was replacing, who was just going back to the UK, he said, "We've had a great time. We're going to come back and live in Canada." So cut a long story short, we applied for a permanent residence, ended up buying a house after a year, and then we stayed. And so I retired from the military and stayed in Canada.
Right. And what was your, just out of curious, because I'm Canadian, I love how foreigners, for lack of a better term, visualize Canada or experience Canada for the first time. Like, what was it like on a motorcycle when you first started riding in Canada?
Slow on the roads. I couldn't believe how slow the speed limits in Canada were a lot lower and the roads were a lot straighter. So on road, it was pretty slow and boring, but also kind of sketchy because you go around the corner here and because of the sides of the road are gravel, you can't guarantee when you rip around the corner, there isn't going to be a big patch of gravel. I didn't have any big accidents on the road, but I could see it happening. Right. And I didn't actually get into the dirt riding until I'd been here about 4 or 5 years. And that's another story. I threw myself in the deep end and tried to play hockey, then met a guy who rode dirt bikes who introduced me to a whole bunch of dirt biking guys. And yeah, off we went.
Right. So that was your re-entry into dirt biking.
Yeah.
Way more hours spent on a dirt bike.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what year is that? Like 2010, 2011?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I lived on Base Borden my first year. I moved out to where I am now near Shelburne after the first year, and then a couple of years after that. So 6, 7, 8, no, 2009, something like that is probably when I really started getting back into it. Wearing an old trials helmet, a pair of boots I brought over, and no real riding gear particularly.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's fast forward. So, you dove back into dirt bikes in 2010, 2011. We met you in 2018. And when I met you, I would label you as like an average dirt biker. And when I say average, just like intermediate trail rider, you can just about go anywhere, not super quick. Sometimes you're paddling and, sometimes it's not as pretty as it should be. But just like every other intermediate trail rider with not a ton of race experience.
Yeah.
That was in 2000. What year was that? 16?
Yeah, I think it
No,
might have been a bit earlier than that. Yeah.
15 or 16. Yeah, I think that was in 15. And then in 2018, we saw you again at Outlaw Run out here in British Columbia.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe the dramatic change in your ride. Like, you didn't even appear like the same rider. Like, your body language is completely different. Your confidence level was completely different. Like, I was just dumbfounded on how far you progressed in 3 years. So what happened? Like, what did you do? Like, did you change the way you think about it, or did you just have a goal, or like what happened?
To be, it's a bit of a complex answer. There's a simple answer, which is I rode a lot more. I did a ton more riding, but I also did some training. I went and did a Chris Birch level 1 and level 2 course, and that changed a lot of the way I thought about. Because previously I was just jumping on a bike, riding, trying to keep up with people, and I never really thought about the mechanics of doing it. Whereas Chris Birch broke it down to the basics. He started from scratch, kind of broke down your technique and built it back up again, and that made a huge difference. And then I just rode a lot. I did almost the entire Off-Road Ontario race series one year. And racing is obviously a slightly different thing, but it does push you, and it exposes flaws in your riding. It shows you what gets tired and what isn't working. So I guess, yeah, a bit of coaching and a ton of riding was what changed.
And what about the concept of practice? Like, did you, because I roughly know the Chris Birch curriculum, and I know that he participates and practices a lot with specific drills, on-bike drills. Did you add that to your repertoire, or did you just continue to ride trail more with the knowledge that he gave you in the back of your mind?
I definitely added the drills, and every time I get on a bike, while it's warming up, I'm doing figure of eights, full lock turns.
Right.
And I remember I watched your why you can't slow wheelie and never will, because it's boring and because it takes a lot of practice, and that's absolutely true. I'd go out to my garage in the winter. I wouldn't even start my bike, and I'd just try and balance on it. And I have a trials bike, and I built a little thing to ride my trials bike in about a 24-foot square area where there was no snow. And it's not the most exciting riding. There's a picture of that. My trials bike and a box that I built to ride over with different approach angles, and I just went out there, and I'd be out there for a couple of hours. So yeah, I think the drills, it's not too exciting, but it really does help.
Yeah. So, like, of those things, what was the key thing that changed it, or was it a whole bunch of little things added up to like a big change?
I think, yeah, a whole bunch of little things. There isn't a magic button. There isn't go and practice this and you'll be better. I think balance is huge, and clutch control. I think those two are the things that carry over, obviously, from trials. But they help you when you're in a snotty situation. They help you keep moving forward. They help you get traction. Those are kind of the two things I would say is the clutch control, and because it doesn't really matter what you're doing with the throttle. You can be wide open throttle, you can be shut throttle, but if you can modulate it with your clutch, then you've got so much more control. You can do so many more things on a bike.
That makes perfect sense to me. If you're just tuning in and you're wondering what we're talking about and who I'm talking with Paul Hallett. The reason you should care is because Paul represents Average Man, Weekend Warrior, and Paul just completed Romaniacs in the bronze class, which, if you know anything about Romaniacs, it's a big deal. It's a big accomplishment. So we're exploring with Paul sort of how he walked that path and what were some of the key things along the way. So Paul was just telling us a little bit about, like, I noticed a huge difference in his riding over 3 years, not seeing you and then seeing you and just being like, holy smokes. because you rode with our A-level guides that whole week with Ben and Kevin, and you guys had a great time. Like you guys were all well suited and had a blast.
Yeah, we did, absolutely. Yeah, and the same in Gas Bay, riding with the guys out there. And I kept in touch with Pat and Ewan, the guys from California. They invited me to go down, so I jumped on a plane and went down there, and we went and did a week in the Mojave Desert, which was fantastic, just insane. Yeah.
I love those stories because I feel like all the rides that we've done and all the people from all over the world that sort of met each other, and we're also like-minded. Like it's not rocket science why we all get along and all get together.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Lots of people stay to get like everyone's still in touch, and it's
I'm still in touch with Pat and Ewan. Yeah,
awesome. So let's talk about your mindset and sort of how you think about things. So like over the course of your dirt riding career, which spans since you were like 14, 15 years old, how did you think about racing? And how did you think about competition added to motorcycles? And I'm talking specifically about dirt, like, we'll leave street out of this for now. And like, did that tickle your fancy? Did you used to fantasize about, being on the top step of the podium and, having girls screaming and running toward you?
No, to be honest, I probably shied away from competition to start because it kind of scared me. To be honest, I thought that was, out of my league. And what drew me into it was friends who were going racing and saying, "Hey, you should come and do this race." And I started doing some, and it was fun. And to start with, it was hard. Then it got a little bit easier. And yeah, I mean, it's still not my favorite thing to do ever, because for me personally, I'd rather go and play in an area and practice on it rather than trying to rattle through it as fast as I can once and get it wrong. Because if I rattle through it once and get it wrong, did I learn anything? If I rattle through it once and get it right, woohoo, fantastic. But could I do that again? So that's kind of my mindset about it. It's fun. It teaches you things. It certainly teaches you how to think on the fly and keep moving, which is really important. Something like Romaniacs. But yeah, I'm equally happy to just go and play around in a small area at a slower pace and take my time and work things out.
So are you a competitive person, say outside of motorcycles generally? And if you are or aren't, does that change when you add motorcycles to it? Like how does competition fit into this whole thing?
People that would know me would probably say I'm fairly competitive. If I've got a chance. If I haven't got a chance, then okay, fine. I'll just I'll ride along and do whatever. But if I've got a chance of getting past someone, and if it's close, then absolutely I get competitive, and there'll be elbows going. And when we ride with the Wednesday group, we'll go and we'll be thrashing through the bush, and there'll be people cutting it in front of each other, and we're laughing while we're doing it. But yeah, there's a competitive edge there, and you're trying to get past someone. You're trying to work out how you're going to get past them in the next corner. And yeah, so I am competitive. But there's kind of a limit. When I know that I can't be competitive, then it's okay. Yeah, back off.
And when you see the brass ring, is it win at all costs at that point for you? Like, is it like blocking out physical, mental pain? Like, are you just like tunnel vision?
Possibly. I mean, I've never been there that often where I've got, win it all, as a chance to win it. The first race I ever won, I had no chance. I didn't even realize I was in the lead. I didn't even know it was happening. I didn't know until afterwards that I was in the lead and I'd won it, which might have been helpful, to be honest.
Right. Super interesting. So you mentioned you were in the military, and we won't get into Romaniacs right now. We will really quickly, but has your military training and experience, has that swung over to dirt bikes at all? And like, because like weekend warriors go on these trail rides typically, and they can be quite grueling. You're with your friends and you're put in all kinds of difficult situations, mentally, physically, flies, mud. Does the military background, do you draw from that when you're on the motorcycle?
I would say definitely, and there's probably two areas. One is, yeah, I've done some long physical hard things in the military. I was in an airborne unit, and they're known for, you put a rucksack on your back and you go and you go and you go and you go. And the second one is something that you need at a longer event, like Romaniacs, is your administration. Always looking around and making sure that your shit's in one sock, and being prepared for the next day. So when you get back, you don't just crash and throw everything on the floor. You refill your camelback with water for the next day. You do everything possible to prepare yourself, to give yourself the best chance of success. You don't wear new kit, you don't wear new items. I mean, this is an obvious thing to say, but you don't you use tried and tested things to get you through. And that paid out in Romaniacs. Everything I wore, everything I used was familiar, and I knew where it was on the bike, and I wasn't doing anything crazy or different. And even if I was tired, I'd try and make sure I was ready to go the next day, because it takes the same amount of time in the morning as it does in the evening, except if something happens funky between then and the morning, then you're all screwed up.
Right. Right. That makes sense. We have a concept we call that guy. And that guy is the person who basically doesn't bring any administration into their dirt bike trail riding. So they show up with no gas, their tire is flat, and they just haven't done any advanced preparation. And what it does is usually spoil it for the group. So I find it interesting that you call that administration, and you understand and realize it's an important part.
Yeah, to quote one of our training instructors when I was in the military going through basic training, he said, "Admin, Mr. Hallett, is not a town in China."
Right. That makes sense. So let's talk about Romaniacs. We're dragging our heels because I wanted to set a good groundwork for anyone who's paying attention and listening, because I think it's important that they know who you are, so then they can understand how you ended up at Romaniacs, and then they can also understand how you made it through Romaniacs, because I think that's going to be the interesting part for me psychologically. Sure. So let's talk about it. So you're a trail rider, you ride with your friends, you're increasingly taking it more seriously because you're getting more into like some light racing and you're exploring those things. When was the first time that Romaniacs popped into your head? And not only that, because it popped in your head at some point, when did you actually whisper to yourself quietly in a dark room, I think I might attempt this?
It kind of happened at the same time, because I'd just done the local race Terra Nova, Off-Road Ontario race, and I got a call from Scott Thornton, or a text from Scott, who I ride with a bunch of blokes, and he said, "Hey, there's a couple of us thinking about doing Romaniacs next year. Do you want to come?" And I went, "Okay." And so it was the same time. That was the kind of, I thought about Romaniacs and committed kind of thing, and yeah, that was it. I was in.
You must have known that Romaniacs existed. Like, what before that call, that text? What was your impression or perception of what Romaniacs was?
To be honest, if it hadn't been for that call, that text, I probably wouldn't have even thought about doing it, because my perception, it was up here. It was something that was ridiculously difficult. It was a long way away. The preparation for it was crazy. It wasn't something that was really on my radar of thinking of something I could do. But once I got the invite and I knew there were people that I knew and trusted and rode with that were going, I thought, well, okay, if they're going, we'll all go and fail it together or get through it together.
So it was just the idea of having your comrades or your riding buddies, your trusted riding guys, because if it's your riding group, typically you trust those men deeply, and just the thought that, well, shit, they're going, so
that was
what could possibly happen, right?
Yeah. Well, and the guys that said they were going to go, I knew they were the type of guys that weren't going to take this lightly. They were going to get some serious training done. They were going to think about it, prepare as best as possible. So I knew it was a good group of guys to to put myself in with. It wasn't like we're just going to, hey, let's sign up and turn up. There was going to be a fair bit of prep and training, and we wanted to do a load of events, and because of coronavirus, we couldn't do all of those, but we did do a lot of training. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because you probably would have second guessed it if it was two clown friends of yours who were like, hey, we should give this a try, knowing that no prep and they're going to drink beer all night and who knows.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So let's talk about, so you made the decision to go, which is a huge leap, like a big off the cliff. How did family receive it? Were people freaked out? Too dangerous?
No, I mean, to be honest, I don't think, outside of the riding community, and my family aren't a big riding community. Sarah, she rides. She's got a little TTR 125, which is a fantastic little bike, but not really into the competition. And so probably Romaniacs, it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a bit of an unknown thing. Red Bull Romaniacs sounds quite glamorous or big, but no real understanding of what that involved. Nor did I entirely, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm Paul. I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. I'm getting alerts from the sky that there's something going to drop on us, so we're going to let it drop, and then we'll come back and talk some more about Romaniacs.
Okay.
Hey man,
Nice.
So I love the idea that you've committed to Romaniacs, and I have thought about it, not seriously, because that's just not my thing. But I know that most people that ride a dirt bike know what Romaniacs is, and they fantasize about it sometimes, and they consider it, and they wonder, can I do this? Can I not do this? We've got a man in front of us who committed to it with his riding buddies. What happened then?
Right, so I guess then it was getting signed up. It was paying the entry fee. It was working out how we're going to get over there, flights, and we were going to do it not this year, the year previously. So we'd signed up for that, and then COVID put a kibosh on that. They actually ran the event. They managed to put it on in Romania, but a lot of people couldn't get there, and we decided it was all going to be too tricky, so we put it off for another year. But we just got into the training. We got together a lot. We went and trained with Shane Cuthbertson out in Alberta a couple of times, and he's training out, because you haven't got the train to train for Romaniacs in Ontario. There's just not hills big enough. And we went out there and we rode a lot, and we did a lot of big hill training, a lot of tips and tricks. He's a top 10 finisher twice in the gold class in Romania. So he's got the serious chops. He's an amazing rider, really good coach. So yeah, we did that 2 years in a row. And I think all three of us that went this year wouldn't have got through it if it hadn't been for that coaching. And I was telling myself as I was riding along, I was telling myself the stuff that he'd been teaching us. And when I was going down a crazy hill, I was doing the things he taught. Yeah. When I was going up a hill, I was thinking, do this, do that, think about this, look up. All the little things, the tricks and tips that just help get you through.
So I did not realize, I mean, I know Shane Cuthbertson. He's got a big reputation in Canada. He's a little older. His successes were all probably early 2000s?
I think 2014, 2015, something like that.
14, 15.
Yeah, so not that long ago, but yeah.
So he's got a big rep here. He's from Alberta, but I had no idea he was that accomplished. I really had no idea.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We were out there and we'd get stuck on some hill and we couldn't go any further. And Shane would ride down the hill, stop, give us some tips, then turn around and set off back up the hill. And we were just, how does he do that? A funny story, the first time I was out there, we flew out there the first year, and we got some rental bikes out there. And my bike had a slightly used, slightly rounded off tire, and the other guys had brand new Kender Ibex or something like that. And I was looking enviously at their tires, and we rode for one day with those tires on. And then when we got back, Shane said, "You know what? I'll put a new tire on your bike." So he put a new tire on my bike, and he took the wheel off my bike and put it on his. So he's now got this slightly old tire with another day's riding on it, and I've got a brand new Ibex. Next day, he's doing the same thing, riding rings around all of us. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
It's not the tire, Paul. It really isn't.
Right.
And I was joking, I want that tire back. Because it was the technique, it was his skill, it was his anticipation, his bike control, all that put together meant that, a new tire gives you mentally a little bit of an edge, I think, maybe, but really, it's not that much. It's the rider.
We, as you probably know, we're always preaching it's 80% rider, 20% bike. I've been through the experience that you just talked about so many times, and usually getting our ass whipped by a better rider on a worse bike. Yeah. And it just gets pounded into your head that you can buy the gold this and the anodize that, and the bright, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, I do agree it makes some difference, but I mean, to a good rider, tires don't matter, and it's technique. Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to mention a few more things about Shane. If you don't know the name Shane Cuthbertson, he's Canadian, so you may not recognize the name, even if you are Canadian. He's also, he used to run an event called Extinction, which was ahead of its time, I think, in this country. It was like a hard enduro before hard enduro hit Canada, at least the consciousness of Canadian dirt riders. But then he leveraged that into Red Bull Rocks and Logs in Calgary. And that ran for a number of years. That's now over, that's completed. But Shane just started another event called Red Bull Outliers. And that event happens to be next weekend. And some of the URAG guys, some of our guides, Kevin Bernards has signed up for that. And he's been training here on the property, getting ready to go to Outliers. So I just wanted to mention the tie-in with who Shane Cuthbertson is, the events, some of the events that he's done. And, he's deeply involved in the sport here. Yeah, absolutely. And what a great guy, great rider, really good coach. And, I hope that event goes really well, because they ran it a couple of years ago and they had a freak snowstorm and it cancelled it kiboshed the event. But he's, this is his company, Rad 2.0, Race and Athlete Development, and he does coaching. We couldn't have done it without the stuff that he taught us, definitely. So, he would be an excellent coach to train elite riders, guys that want to do something special. Yeah, and he's also very well connected with Chris Birch, who is a Romaniacs winner, gold class, and who travels the globe doing training. And when Chris couldn't get across to Canada because of COVID, he authorized Shane to run his Say No to Slow courses in Canada. Oh, nice. So he for someone like Chris Birch to accredit you to run his courses, that's a pretty big deal. And he wouldn't give that to just anyone. Right. And I've met Shane a handful of times, and he's always been so polite and considerate and courteous, and just grounded, like most dirt riders, and also like most Canadians. But he's the real thing. It's anyway. Absolutely. I just wanted to give him some props. Yeah, and we had a funny, he'd advise you to do stuff. He'd say, "Paul, I'd advise you to try this." Or what he really meant was, stop being such a tool. Don't do it like that. Do it like this. But he was such a nice guy. He'd just say, "I'd advise you." Right. When Shane advises, you do that. Right. Yeah. That's great. So, okay, let's get into Romaniacs. So that was your training. Obviously, you guys stepped it up. You took it seriously. Yeah. Let's talk about costs. And the reason I know a lot of people wonder about costs, I wonder about costs. What does it cost? Like, let's break this down. Like, what does it cost to register for Romaniacs? Just the first step. Just be like, hey, I'm thinking I'm going to go. To be honest,
put your money down. I can't remember exactly how it all breaks down, but it's not
Yeah,
cheap.
just
It's like it's thousands of dollars because they're putting on this huge event. They've got so much organization, so much track marking. They've got medical facilities everywhere. They've got a helicopter on standby, which they used during this event. You know, they've got huge costs to cover, so it's not a cheap event for them to run. You've then got your flights. You've then got accommodation. We rented bikes out there, which again isn't cheap because you're going to put 40 hours on a dirt bike in a week. So I would say, but you could it probably costs you the same as a new dirt bike, to be honest.
right.
That's
So you're
that's
talking
all I
anywhere
would.
from $9,000 to $15,000.
Yeah, probably yeah, 9 to 12, something like that. If you
Right.
added up everything that you had to spend to do it, it's probably yeah in that range. Yeah,
And we're
I
talking
probably don't.
Canadian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't really want to add it all up because it would be frightening. But I
Yeah,
guess it's
and
in that region.
you would like to remain married.
Yes, yeah.
She'll never see it. Yeah, no, I just, yeah, I've heard the number of 10,000 for a Canadian to go to Romaniacs, rent a motorcycle. Now let's talk about the motorcycle rental situation. Did you guys even consider bringing your own bikes, or is that just outlandish?
I think, particularly given COVID, it would have been a nightmare to try and get it organised. You're then without your bike unless you happen to have a second bike to do training on. And then I don't know. It just seemed the logistics of it, particularly given that the first event that we registered for didn't happen. We would have had to start shipping our bikes and then brought them back. So no, it made a lot more sense to get the bikes out there. And what we also did, which again was more cost, but we paid for those guys to do everything possible to give us the best chance of success. So they did the servicing, they put new tires on the bikes, they drove us to the start line where we'd meet our bikes, so we weren't having to spend an hour or something on just driving on the pavement road, sitting me down a road to get to the start line. We got driven there in a minibus, and the bikes were there. And then when we got back, we gave them the bikes, and we got the minibus back to where we were staying, all to give us the best possible chance of getting some rest and not having to work on bikes, to give us the best chances of success.
So that full serving or all inclusive bike package, what does that cost? And ballpark, I don't need exact numbers. I'm just wondering what that costs, like what portion of your total spend that costs. And then the other thing I'm wondering about is, are there a whole bunch of companies that do this? And like, what kind of choices do you have? Like, if I want to ride a Kawasaki KX500 at Romaniacs, can I do that? Or is it like, how does that work?
So I would say it's probably between 35 and 40% of the total cost, I would say, plus the cost of anything you have to put back on the bike that you've smashed to pieces during the event. And there were a few things that we broke. There are a number of companies doing it. We went with a company called Ride X Power, because Lee Martin, who you probably know, he had a connection with them. He'd had a good experience with them. So, and they were great, very efficient. I think it's a German company, and nothing like bringing your battered bike in and giving it to a bunch of Germans to fix, because they're going to be pretty efficient with it. German engineering, and in terms of the bike, you're going to be riding an Austrian bike, if you're going with any of those rental companies. They're all KTM's, Huskies. I actually had a gas, but it was a new gas, so it's a red KTM.
Right. So that gas that you rode, was that like a 2020 gas? And was it brand new? Like,
Not for long.
what condition?
So the previous year, I've been riding. I was an early adopter on TPI, so I had a 2018 250 TPI, which is the first year they came out, and you could only get the 250.
Right.
So when I booked for the first year, I was getting a 250 TPI Husky, so it was a similar sort of bike. I put 300 hours on that bike, and then the start of this year, I got a gas EC300. And at the same time, X Power announced that they were getting some gas new bikes in. So I moved from the 250 to the 300. So I was riding the same bike out there.
And what about for like ergos, for example? You know, I'm freakishly tall. You know, we know people that are, you know, Meg's Brap is tiny. She's 5'2". What kind of ergo support do those companies offer you if you want to go over and I'm like, oh, I love my pivot pegs, or I want risers, or how
Yeah, I
does that
mean,
work?
you can take all that stuff, and we arrived a few days early, and we put the components on that we wanted to. For me, being 160 odd pounds and 5'10", I'm right in the sweet spot for those bikes. So I didn't really need to do much. Scott, on the other hand, is a big, tall, well, you know, muscly guy, weighs a lot more. So he took his own suspension over. And people took individual components that they wanted. I run the Chris Birch extended brake pedal, which brings it a little bit closer to the foot peg. So I took that brake pedal tip and I put it on the bike. So just
Right.
little stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, they have them over there, but I had tug straps front and rear, so I took those over and put them on.
Right.
Just
So
little things, but yeah.
that support team that you paid to be your pit crew or your support staff, you bring them the stuff, they take care of all that for that inclusive price.
Yeah.
And ballpark, what's that cost? I don't know if you said this or not.
So yeah, I said probably about 35 or 40% of the total cost. I would say it's not cheap.
That's fair though, because it's
Yeah,
such a big part of the experience. Like if I went
absolutely.
over there and I was on a janky bike that wasn't set up, like already my experience is going to be terrible.
Yeah, and they meet you at the service points during the race,
Yeah.
and we come into the service points. Anything broken on your bike, they get straight at it. The format this year was a little bit different. So there was an overnight stay where you had to work on your own bike, or you got 50 minutes, so you couldn't really do much. So the service point before that, they changed tires, and they had 40 minutes, change tires. They had food and drink available for you there, and just made life so much easier. We couldn't have done it. We definitely couldn't have done it without that support.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I feel like we're sort of exploring price, but we're diving into sort of what's happening day to day. I want to back up a bit and I want to talk about, because although I understand Romaniacs and what it is, I don't understand the details. So how many classes are there and how many days does the race go?
Okay, so classes first. There's gold, and on the Romaniacs webpage, they kind of describe what sort of rider you need to be in each class. So gold is the top 50 riders in the world. Impossible to ride for a normal human being. Silver is kind of, you've got to be national level. You might be an aspiring gold rider. You might be a gold rider who wants to have a bit more fun because that is too crazy. And then bronze is the most popular category. So you've done, you're a very competent enduro rider. You've done some races, you've done reasonably well. And then they've added some classes. Iron is the one below that, which is probably more fun. Still hard, no question. And then Atom, which is a new class this year, which is like a very challenging trail ride, I would guess. So that's the classes and sort of the level. And the event is, they have a prologue, which organizes your start times for the next 4 days, and then 4 off-road days. And in this year and last year, because of COVID, they didn't have the city centre prologue over the crazy obstacles. It was just a time trial through the woods, which was a bit more like the actual race, but not as spectacular for the press and anybody downtown.
Right. And so you enter the prologue and you're competing in that prologue against other people that are in your class.
Correct. Yeah.
And then that determines on day one your start position.
Yes. Yeah.
And what kind of a start is it? Is it like a mass start, or is it lines of 15, 20 people?
No, they set you off individually based on your time. And the prologue, they were setting us off. There was 2 rows. There was bronze and atom that were at the same start. And then very soon after the start, about 10 minutes after the tracks would split, and atom would go one way and bronze would go another way. So they set the time trial up dependent to kind of mirror the conditions you'd get out on your actual racetrack. So the gold prologue or time trial would be gold level, bronze was bronze level, atom would be easier.
I'm getting messages from the sky one more time, and I'm going to have Hey, yeah. So that was an ad for Logger Camp, which we added to our repertoire in the last 2 years, and that's sort of a dream of ours to do something more advanced. And anyway, there's one coming up if anyone's listening in local. There's one coming up September 12th. So back to Romaniacs.
Yes.
So,
Go on.
yeah. So now I understand. The format. I understand the classes, and my favorite part's coming up because I want to talk a lot about the psychology, what you faced, what you went through. When you read the description of bronze class on the website, and now that you've been through the event, does it match? Does it make sense? Like looking back on that is like God, they're just sucking me over here and throw me at,
Well,
it's not that
I mean,
at all.
I think our experience this year is probably different to all the different years because you can't really compare year to year because everything's different. Weather makes a huge change. They try and keep it difficult, so they're upping the game every year. But to be honest, we underestimated it. I don't think we realized how hard it was going to be. I had a terrible start. It got worse, and we can explore that if you like. And eventually, I kind of rode my way into it. But halfway through day one, I was thinking, I'm not sure I can do 4 days of this.
Right.
Yeah.
How did it feel when you were, how did you do in prologue? Like, where did you end up in your start in your class? Like, and also, how many people in the class, just to give us some context?
So I think there was about 200 and something in the class, in bronze class, because it's the most popular one. And I had a nightmare on my prologue because I set off and I said there's some atom riders, and we got to in the first like 3 minutes, we got to an off-camber ledge, and it's the sort of thing that you look ahead and you just ride straight over it. It's not even memorable. But the person in front of me, the atom rider, froze just before they got onto it and was just sat there, and there was no way around them. So I'm sitting behind going, time's ticking. I've got to get past them. They've got to move. And I'm shouting, go, go, go. And they kind of edged onto this off-camber bit and then stalled. And then they were, inching across, and I was losing my mind. Day one, Romaniacs, I'm trying to get in a position, and I'm just held up. I'm not moving.
Right.
And, this rider got a little bit further on. I thought, I think I can get around them. And as they were getting off the end, I tried to go around. My back wheel slipped off. Knowing what I know now, I should have stopped immediately and lifted it back up. But I tried to make it, and my bike slipped off this little ledge, and it dropped, 6 feet down this slope. And I thought, I cannot get it back up there. I tried to lift the bike up, and as soon as I lifted it off the ground, it started going even further. And the guy from up top was going, whoa, 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 stop. And I looked behind me, and it went vertical. And I was now, what do I do? I can't get it back up there. If I lift my bike, it's going to go down this cliff. And this is day one. I'm 5 minutes into Romaniacs. So they had to get a rope and pull me back up onto the track. And so I'm now thinking, right, well, I'm last, obviously, on day one off-road day. So I'm just going to finish this time trial. So I rode around the rest of the time trial. It was about 30 minutes. So yeah, that was my prologue. And I wasn't actually last because there were people that ran out of fuel for some reason. But I was pretty much at the back of the pack on day one of the off-road.
And what are we talking prologue? Like, what time do you line up in the morning?
The prologue, you mean the time of day we start?
Yeah.
It's early starts. You're normally up about 5 o'clock in the morning to go and get your GPS to get to the start line, and you don't want to be late. And then depending on, you could be starting at 7 o'clock in the morning as in away, or you could be up to, a couple of hours after that, up to 9 o'clock.
And then how long is the prologue? I know it's as long as you make it, but like
the prologue was only about 30 minutes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So they're sort of dusting you guys off and getting you a warm up. And then the other thing you mentioned, GPS. Is the whole event GPS? Like you're navigating and riding?
You have GPS, but they actually mark the course fantastically well. They're blue ribbons, and to be honest, you could probably ride the course without a GPS. I didn't use it a whole bunch at all. You only really used it to kind of give you a heads up which way the track was going to go. or if you couldn't see a blue ribbon. So you'd get out on the high meadows and there's not really a place to hang blue ribbons in grass. So you
Right.
look down and, okay, it's a straight line. Or if you look down and you were off the track, then you knew you had to turn around and get back onto the track.
Right.
But they did a fantastic job ribboning the entire course, which is, up to 150 Ks a day, 4 different tracks, 5 different classes. But no, it was really well marked, actually. So you needed it for safety too. If you came across an injured rider and you need to report what that position was, then you put a waypoint on and you could contact them. And they also use it to track you where you've been. So you hand your GPS in at the end of the day, and they compare the track you should be on with the track that you're supposed, that you actually rode, so they can see if you cut the course or didn't finish it.
Right. I would suspect that, let's say me, I'm not going to be out front. So I suspect that I could pretty much just follow the most used track.
Yeah.
Is that how you wrote it in your mind? Like you're just following the most used track?
Well, to a certain extent, but then people go wrong. People go too far down hills and then can't get back up. So you can't just blindly follow people, particularly in difficult terrain, because people make mistakes, and then they get themselves into situations where it's going to be really difficult to get out. It's going to use a whole load of time and energy. Particularly going downhill, if you blow a turn and you end up further down the hill you need to be, then it's a fight to get back up to where you want to be. So, yeah, you've got to ride smart as well. You got to, you can't just turn your brain off and follow somebody.
So prologue went. It's almost, disastrous. But I mean, at some point during that, you went from anger and rage to acceptance and just being like, wow, this is it.
Yeah.
Did that help? Having massive failure on day one, did that just get it like, it's like, you have no clothes on in front of the crowd. Did it just get the jitters out? Did it make it worse, make it better?
I think it probably got the jitters out, because then it's like, well, okay, I'm starting last. It can only get better. So that was kind of my philosophy at that point.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Just get it out, get the massive failure out of the way immediately, so I can relax and just start enjoying myself.
Yeah.
So let's talk about day. So you finish prologue. You're in a shit position near the back. Day one arrives. What's that look like? Like, what time are you guys lining on the
So
start
I think I
line?
was
Same thing?
probably leaving about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I think it was something like 120 Ks. But to be honest, the distance doesn't really mean anything. It's the difficulty. And so we set off, and I was riding, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be passing a ton of guys, and I wasn't passing a ton of guys. I was passing some, but not a lot. But it was so hot. It was like 30 plus degrees. And I was expecting it to get cooler as we climbed up to the top, which it did. When you came through the trees at the top, it was a bit cooler and you got a bit of a breeze. But you spent a lot of the time in the trees, and it was humid in there too. So I was just sweating buckets. I was probably getting dehydrated. It was not pleasant. And I'm thinking, I'm working really hard. And, we got to the service point, which was after about a third of the way through that day. And I was kind of hoping it was halfway, because I was probably half done. And then it was like, are we halfway? Oh, no. You've done 40 Ks of 120 or something. Like, oh, God. So, I was thinking at that point, this is crazy hard. I'm going to have to do something different to get through the rest of this.
Right. Because this is the part that's really starting to fascinate me. How are you managing expectations for yourself? Like, you have a GPS and it's 120K. Like, are you glancing down and seeing like, oh, I've only gone 20, I've only gone 23K, I've gone 33K. Like, how are you figuring out where you are in the span of the day?
Well, they give you a best riding time for the course. So they say, okay, best riders are going to finish in 4 hours, cutoff's 8 hours. So to be honest, I was more going on time, and I was thinking, how long have I been out here? And I wasn't expecting it to do 4 hours, but I needed to get in before 8. So that's kind of, and I started looking at the kilometers maybe on day 2, 3, and 4, but I wasn't really doing it on day 1, because I know that they have a habit of throwing something nasty at the end, and kilometers really don't mean anything. We talked to a guy he'd been there before, and he failed on the last day because he couldn't make the final one nasty hill that they threw in on day 4. So you've just got to keep. A lot of people told me you've just got to keep moving forward. You've got to get over the next hill. You've got to get down the next hill. You've got to get over the next obstacle. And really, that's got to be your way of thinking. Just keep moving forward as best you can, and you can't really think about what's happening the next day. You've just got to finish one day at a time, and then even smaller than that, one hill at a time.
Right. So basically, the concept of one foot in front of the other, just over and over and over.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so 120K, difficult terrain, day 1. Surely you're discombobulated and sort of like you're not settled in at all. So I think day 1 would be very difficult, regardless. Day 1 of anything is difficult. How are you managing like how you feel and freaking out mentally and anxiety, and like, are you struggling? I mean, you mentioned that you were like starting to be like, what am I doing here? I don't know if I can do this. Were those thoughts of self-doubt all through the day, or they were coming and going depending on, were you getting some spirit, like, boosts as you're making that hill?
Yeah, I mean, as I got closer towards the end, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to finish day 1. That was, and just one day at a time. But then my bike stopped working. It quit with about 30 k's to go. And it's a long story. I won't bore you with it all, but essentially it was the kill switch was shorting, which might have been when I threw it down a hill one time. But it ended up cutting the kill switch wire, which then got it, and then I was good to go again. But that probably took about 45 minutes. There's a whole story around that, but that'll take too long. But so anyway, got that fixed, carried on, got to the end of day 1 within the time cutoff, despite some of the issues, despite the bike quitting, despite me throwing it down the hill and bending the handlebars. So that was day 1 in the books. I thought, okay, day 1 done. Let's just move on.
What kind of time were you on the bike start to finish? Like, what did that day 1 look like? 4 hours, 7 hours?
That was 8 hours on the bike, I think. Yeah.
8 hours. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big day.
Yeah.
That's a big day, because that's mental. It's a big mental day, and it's a big physical day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the aftermath of day 1. So what happens when you come into the pits, I assume, and give me the play-by-play. Like, what happens at that time? Like, so you come in exhausted, I suspect.
You get in, and actually most people have gone because most people have finished by now, because I started at the back. I had some issues, bike breakdown. So by the time I got in, pretty much everyone else is gone. But I gave my bike to X Power. We got back, and then you start preparing yourself for the next day. You need to go out and get some food. You need to sort your riding gear out. We also had to take our bivouac bags and hand those in, because at the end of day 2, there was camping. We're camping out. We weren't coming back, so you had to go and give them your sleeping bag and your gear for the next day. So you had to go and do that as well. So it was kind of a late finish on day 1 as well, which kind of compounds things. So everything builds on it. If you finish in 4 hours, you've got more time to do all that. If you finish in 8 hours, then you've got less time to do that, to get yourself ready, and then try and get some sleep.
Right. Now, you said something I just found horrifying. Did you say camping?
Yeah, they decided that after day 2, instead of coming back to the town, we were going to sleep in tents overnight, and then start from there for day 3.
Oh, I can't even imagine adding that to the already compounding difficulty of.
I mean, you wouldn't fit in the tent. You wouldn't have fitted in the tent anyway. My head and feet were touching the ends. You'd have to have your feet out the end, I think.
Yeah, I think I would just give up if they put me in a tent after an 8-hour difficult day in the bike, and then expecting me to do it again.
Yeah, and we got there on day 2, and we met Tristan Hart, the Canadian #1, super nice guy, 25 years old, and he came wandering across at the campsite and said, "Hi, how are you going?" And I said to him, yeah, all right. I said, and he looked pretty fresh. He'd had a shower and something to eat by then, probably already. And I said, how long have you been in? And I'm thinking, don't say 4 hours. And he said, about 4 hours.
You hear the crushing sound of your spirit.
How bad am I really? Yeah. How bad do I suck?
But like, let's talk about Tristan Hart just for a sec. Like, I know he's a Canadian. I know he's a super accomplished rider, and he's starting to represent Canada on the world stage, which is fantastic. Was he staying? Because I assume he's gold class guy.
Yeah.
Were they staying in tents?
Oh yeah, everybody was staying in tents.
I can't.
And it was kind of cool because it was just the riders there. There weren't any of the support crew. So you're milling around, and there's Taddy Blazusiak over here, Johnny Walker there. I'm lining up for a crap in the morning next to Billy Bolt. And that was kind of cool.
That is a cool experience. I would have never expected that. I would assume that the pros would have been sort of following their own track and had a little bit more posh accommodations and had more rest and more treatment. But
I mean, the advantage they had was they got there a lot faster than we did, so they probably had a bit more time to sort themselves out. But that's, but they were right. The stuff they ride, I have a whole new respect for those guys at the top.
Right,
it's unreal.
Right.
And Tristan, first time at Romaniacs, did fantastically well. Super nice guy. We went out for dinner with him after the event, and we talked to him about everything that's going on in his life and his racing and how he trains. And yeah, what a great kid. Yeah, 25 years old and traveling the world, sponsored by KTM. Yeah, fantastic.
People always say living the dream. And, for a 25-year-old man from Canada, it's probably as close to living the dream as you can get.
But hard, it's hard. And
oh yeah, no question.
One thing I realized at the very low level that I competed at was getting nervous towards the end of a series because you think you might do quite well when you're Vet B in Off-Road Ontario, but he's getting paid to be that good. He doesn't have a choice. He's got to be up there and he's got to win. He's got to be up there because if he's not winning, some kid behind him is going to be taking his place. So the pressure on those guys is unreal.
We did a documentary called Checkpoints a number of years ago, and we had the fortune to spend lots of time with Graham Jarvis and Colton Haker. And because I'm so interested in the psychology of what they do, I was, at night we're sitting around, I was always digging into that idea of how do you cope with the pressure and when does this not become fun anymore? And they both had a lot to say about that. And I found it fascinating. So I understand, like, Tristan Hart, living the dream is a difficult path to walk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't do that. I don't think. I mean, never had the chance. Not that good ever. But I'm not sure I could do that. Hats off to those guys. For their incredible riding talent, their dedication, but their ability to do that under that pressure as well. Amazing.
When you look at elite sports, any sport, the people that climb to that hierarchy and climb to the top, even existing somewhere near the top, there's a reason that they made it there. It's like they have special qualities and a lot of them to sort of add up to be able to walk that path.
Yeah, I read a really interesting book called Talent is Overrated. And it talked about, nobody's born able to ride a dirt bike. Nobody's born able to swim or skate. And the people that make it to the top, sometimes they have genetic advantages, but that's not enough. You've got to practice like hell, and you've got to do focused practice. It all comes back to that thing we talked about at the start. It's practicing the stuff that you're not good at, not just doing the stuff that's fun. And there's a really good quote I heard: amateurs practice till they get it right. So you're trying to do a double blip. You practice and you get it right and you go, woohoo. So that's an amateur. Pros practice till they can't get it wrong.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Big and they go over it over and over again. So when it comes to it, they can perform. Right. And like we said before, that's not always the most exciting thing in the world, but that's if you want to be that good, you want to get better. That's where you've got to be aiming at.
Yep. I've met lots of guys with tremendous amounts of talent, jaw-dropping talent. Um, I've met guys with jaw-dropping work ethic, but just those things alone won't bring you to the top of that pyramid. You need to have both, and then you need a whole bunch of other things, a lot of intangibles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got to be coachable too. You can't. You've got to learn. There's really smart ways of coaching. There's video. There's people who are better than you. There's riding with people that are better than you. And if you're smart about that, you can progress faster. So it's not just practice, it's focused practice. It's, as I say, practicing on the things that are boring and you're not very good at. And it isn't always fun. But that's what the pros are going to do to get there.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Tristan Hart about that, just about being a Canadian and sort of what that journey is like. You, after the call today, you should just text Tristan and tell him that I'm interested to talk.
Yeah, sure. Well, and also, Scott Thornton, one of the three that were in the bronze class with me, you may know the name because he was an NHL pro for 18 years. He'd be really good to talk to as well, get his perspective on pro level sport and how it matches, how it transitions to dirt bike riding, because he was relatively late to enduro riding, but he took it incredibly seriously. He's obviously very coachable, and the three of us finished places apart. So his slope of improvement was more than mine, and he's still that's him on the far side from me with Lance Webb in the middle there. So he did a fantastic job, and to him it's a science as well. He thinks about it deeply and prepares really carefully.
Yeah, I find it very interesting because he played professional elite sports at a very, very high level, the highest level in his sport, for a very long time. And what he learned there, it will be so interesting to have that translate over, because he's a very different animal than, say, a Tristan Hart, who was born and raised on dirt bikes and was very focused, and now he's now performing at a very high level on a dirt bike. But Scott's come from somewhere completely different and then moved into this world, and now he's taking it seriously. So I mean,
interesting. He had a dirt bike-ish background when he was a kid, but obviously they don't do that when they're in the NHL. So he absolutely put it to one side for a long time and then came back to it. But it was very interesting when we went out for dinner with Tristan. So we're pinging Tristan with technical bike queries and riding tips. And so we're getting that information from him as a gold class rider. But Scott and Lance as well, because he was involved in professional sports too, were able to, from their perspective as 50-plus-year-olds, give him the professional view on sport, the long-term view, and how to have a long career and management of your own sports career. So, I mean, I was neither of those things. I was sitting there listening and just hoovering it all up. But yeah, it was a great conversation.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's super interesting. Okay, so let's get back to the final days of Romaniacs. You come off day one, and you're going into day two. What's going on in your head in the morning?
So day two, I was just thinking, okay, I've managed to get through day one. I've had some difficulties, so day two, let's hope my bike doesn't break down. That's going to help, and let's just go at it and see what happens. And it was a similar day to day one, similar sort of length, still very, very hot, although I'd modified some kit. I was wearing one layer less. I'd made some holes in stuff. I'd taken some padding out. I mean, the top riders they ride with shirts, no protection underneath at all. But I don't bounce anymore. I crumble. So the older I get, the more stuff I wear. And so I need that. So I was wearing more protection, but I was kind of scaling it back a bit. And day two went all right. For me, there was a hill that the silver and bronze, I don't know if the gold went up it as well, towards the end of the day, or maybe 2/3 of the way. I can't really remember, it all blurs. But the three of us referred to it as the hill. And it was hard. I failed it a couple of times. And my last run up it, I was on the edge of exhaustion. I was using every bit of skill, experience, energy that I got left to get to the top of the hill. And I was thinking, if I don't make it this time, I don't know if I can make it. And I got to the top of the hill and got in. And the two other guys with me, the two, Lance and Thordy, they had bigger struggles. They found a way to the top of the hill eventually, but Scott was an hour behind me and Lance was an hour and a half. That one hill almost ended that day for all of us. So yeah, that was the story of day 2, was the hill.
Right. And were you feeling more relaxed mentally? Like, were you feeling like I'm getting a bit into a groove, or I know what to expect this today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the longer you do it, the more you kind of ride yourself into it, and you're understanding how the event works, you're understanding how the navigation works, you're understanding when you come into a hill, what it's going to be like, how long it's going to be. And your learning curve and just how the bike's working, how much grip you've got given the certain terrain. That's all building. Yeah.
Were you guys facing a lot of bottlenecks? I shouldn't say a lot, but I watch enough point of view enduro race cam footage where, man, any hard enduro race, it seems like it's just bottleneck after bottleneck after bottleneck. And these bottlenecks seem to go on for most of the 4-hour race. Were you guys facing a lot of that stuff?
No, it wasn't like that at all, really. Occasionally, you'd come to a hard spot where there's a couple of people stuck. And generally, if it was one line, then people would help each other out. Say, hey, if you help me, I'll help you. And on day 3, there's a Belgian guy, Christopher, who I rode with most of the day because he helped me, I helped him, and then we just helped each other out through the whole day. But no, because it's such a long course, people tend to get spread out, and you tend to be riding at the same speed as the other people because you're setting off with people who are your speed. So no, bottlenecks on this year, on the course that I rode, not really an issue so much.
So what the end of day 2 look like? And maybe you can compare it to day 1. I feel like day 1, you came in a bit bewildered and off balance and sort of, had a bad day, mechanical problems. You're right. Like, your recovery time is cut really short. Everything's compounding. How's day 2 look? Same idea, or were you a bit more like, okay, I understand what's going to happen right now?
Yeah, I mean, day 2 was after the finish of day 2 was at the campsite. So in some ways, there was less admin to do because you didn't have to give your bike one place, go back to somewhere else. Food, sleep, showers, food, everything was in one place. So there was less administration to do. And you're halfway through. You've done day 2. You've survived. So you've got 2 days in the books. You just need to do that again, and you're done. So, and then the worst bit actually was the riders briefing, because they give you a bit of an idea of what's coming the next day. And they said, bronze guys, you start with a technical section, and then you come down a bit of a gnarly downhill. Sorry about that, guys. And then that's in your head. Shit.
Right.
Tomorrow's going to start really hard, and trying to not think about that while you're trying to go to sleep, pretty hard.
Right. So how is the body feeling at this point? Because we've probably, everyone listening has probably been on a 2-day trail ride, and I know how that feels, especially a hard one. How are you feeling at this point?
I was holding up pretty well. I was tired, but nothing really hurt. I hadn't taken a really bad fall. I hadn't strained anything. Nothing was rubbing or no blisters. So physically, apart from just the sort of exhaustion, the fatigue, I was doing okay.
That I guess would be a testament to your preparation.
Yeah, I think, spending long days either riding a bike, or I did a lot of walking in the winter, going out and just walking for quite a few hours. I think the 2 elements that have got to get you through Romaniacs is your physical conditioning and your skills on a bike, and they've got to be both pretty decent.
Yeah, that's why I was just going to ask you, which one do you feel is more important? But you seem to indicate that they both need to be high.
Absolutely, because I mean, the better you are on a bike, the less physical effort it's going to take, particularly when you get to those difficult situations. And if you can ride up a hill clean first time, then you're using way less energy than sweating to death, lifting your bike up. You know, that gets in your head as well. So yeah, bike skills important, but it's going to be it's not easy. Even for the guys that do it in 4 hours, they're going fast as well. So they're giving their body a bit more hammering at speed. So yeah, I'd say, and again, it depends on the race, depends on the year, depends if it rains, how difficult it gets. But absolutely, I don't think you could really say bike skills. Get a load of bike skills, and it doesn't matter about how fit you are, or vice versa.
Right. I definitely understand the higher your bike skills are, the less energy you're burning. The less energy you burn, the longer you will last, the better situation you're in, the less chance you're going to crash. So, and the opposite is true. The more you crash, the more energy you burn, and you're spiraling down, and it's really tough to recover, especially in a 4-day event where it's straight. I have a couple questions because I want to do day 3, day 4, relatively quickly. But I have a question. Tony asked a question. He's watching. He asked about your kit. So what does your kit look like? I mean, obviously, boots, gear, all that, but like specifically hydration pack, a big backpack, small backpack? Are you carrying tools? Are you carrying spares?
Yeah, I carried tools. I pretty much carried the standard toolkit, but I got it on the bike. I put it in the airbox. I tried to get as much stuff off my back as possible. I had a spare spark plug. I had some liquid metal, or the quick metal, again on the bike. On my back, I had mostly food, water, and the emergency kit. They give you have to carry a certain amount of emergency kit. You've got your phone in there. Yeah, so I tried to get as much of it off my back as possible, but I had a 3-liter camel back. Yeah.
I see. So 3 liters of hydration. And then were you carrying like a larger backpack than you would normally carry on a trail ride? Or were you just sticking with your battle tested kit?
Yeah, but my battle tested, as I say, I tried to ride with what I was used to, and keep as much off my back as possible. So the tools were on the bike, spares were on the bike. I had some food on the handlebars, a couple of those elastic straps so I could get to them quickly, and to remind myself to eat and keep taking those in. So yeah, on my back was a little bit of kit and water. Oh, and a jacket, which I never used.
Right. Now, it just made me think, like tools make me think, and weight makes me think about the idea of moose, tubeless, or tubes. What were you running?
The bikes came with moose, and yeah, that absolutely. You don't want to be getting a flat out there. You could do it with tubeless, you could do it with tubes, but it's just one less thing to worry about. So we all run moose, yeah, which I'd never used before, but it was
that's
worked well.
interesting. Yeah, we've got a maniac friend who guides for us, Charlie True, who you know. He's
Charlie.
Welsh.
That's it, Charlie. I have your T-shirt. Charlie wanted me to get him a T-shirt, so don't worry, Charlie. I have it.
Is he Scottish, Irish?
He could
Welsh?
be. I think maybe Welsh. I think
the dirty Welsh. Charlie told me that in Europe, Europeans have adopted moose early, and moose is a common thing to ride with in Europe. Like that's just how he grew up, and that all his riding buds. So it makes sense to me that in Romania, not only would it be moose just because it's a more common situation, but also the nature of the race. You don't not want to deal with a flat.
Yeah, moose, not just in Canada.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, it's slowly being adopted here, and during our clinics, we do a bike setup portion in the morning, and we always discuss tubes, tubeless, or moose. And I'm always surprised on how many people have never heard of a moose, and they don't even understand the concept. We really need to explain that it's a foam donut, and then
I run tubeless normally. I run tubeless normally because I like being able to adjust the pressures, and I'm lazy. and moose is a lot of work, and it's hard to put in unless you've got a Rabaconda or a good time. And then there's people that will tell you, oh, you just get used to it and it's easy. Well, yeah, it's all relative, I think.
Right.
If I'm just riding with my buddies and I have a flat or my tubeless fails, okay, I'll just end the ride, go home. But that's actually never happened to me. But yeah, again, it goes back to making life as easy as possible for you out in Romania.
Cool. That is the legendary Chuck Harder.
Yeah.
We've
I mean, if I had a mechanic, if I was a pro rider with mechanic, it'd be Moose's all the way.
Yeah, of course, yeah. We so many people ask us about those things. We actually started a tire changing clinic, a 1-day clinic, which doesn't sound very exciting, but a lot of people are actually, they want to become proficient at that. Like you know what it's like early on in your tire changing career, things are difficult. But with some repetition
sweaty,
and some technique,
bruised knuckles, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely something that once you get some tricks and tips, it becomes a ton easier. Yeah, but I would never do it for fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about day 3. So you come off day 2, you're probably feeling a little bit more elated and a bit more relaxed because it's like I know the drill. I've gone through hump day, day 2, and then what happens the morning of day 3? You're facing
the morning of day 3. Yeah, it was as described. It was a really technical uphill, which was a struggle, and the downhill was super sketchy. You're off your bike walking it. Sometimes you're walking it across a side slope, praying to God that you didn't slip and end up 50 feet down a hill. And I don't know, it took us something like an hour to do the first few Ks. It was ridiculous. So going back to the kilometers mean nothing. But once that was out of the way, then okay, that was what we were told it was going to be, and that's now behind us. And then the rest of the day went pretty well. As I say, I met this Belgian guy who hit Christopher, who helped me out in one spot, and I helped him. And then we actually pretty much rode the rest of the day together, which was great. He was faster in some spots, I was faster in some spots. We got through day 3. The only thing for me was because I was just riding along with someone else at their pace, I wasn't eating and drinking as much as I should. And we got to the end of day 3, and there was a wall ride over a river at the end, which was fun. And then we came in, and I finished, and I was really feeling it. I was feeling a bit wobbly after day 3. I think that it was just taking its toll at that point. Those whole 3 days, I wasn't feeling my best after day 3. But again, you've taken another step towards the end, and the riding was getting better, and I learned some things from Christopher. He's been an experienced rider. He'd been there before. We were riding up a hill, and it was one of those ones where they played a bit of a trick on you. Halfway up the hill, there was a right-hand turn. And it was very easy to go blasting past it, and the hill was getting steeper and steeper and steeper. So Christopher stopped, and he was looking up this hill, and 2 guys went blasting past us up the hill. And he looked up the hill, he said, "That's too hard. They wouldn't send us up there." And we looked around, and he was right. Off we went. It dropped down over a lip and went another way. So the 2 guys that blasted up the hill are now stuck up there trying to work out how they're going to get themselves back down again. And off we went. But yeah, so it was an interesting day. I learned more stuff. And it was another day in the books.
I find it interesting that you met Christopher on the trail, and then I assume what happened is you guys were just leapfrogging each other for a while, and then you helped him, he helped you. Did you guys make like a conscious decision, like, hey, do you want to ride together today? Or did it just work out sort of organically that you guys ended up doing that?
Pretty much organically, I think, because he helped me, I helped him, and then there would be sections where I was faster than him, and I'd be pushing him, and then I'd go ahead a bit, and he was very good up the hills, pretty good down the hill, very good down the hills. The technical rocky riverbeds and things like that, I was better at, so I'd lead on those, and he'd follow me, or rocks and logs and things, getting over them. He was having more of a problem than I was. So we kind of complemented each other. Could I have gone faster without him? I don't know. But if I got stuck and I couldn't get out, then definitely not. And I think we got to the end and we were like, big hugs. Yeah, I'm my new best friend. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's battle tested. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I feel like coming out of day 3, you're exhausted, probably physically and mentally. What are you telling yourself? Like, there's a day left. What's the rider meeting look like? Like, what are they telling you?
I mean, it's funny. I looked at, and it was online briefings, not in-person briefings, and they said, another tough day for bronze. And then I went and looked at all the other classes, and they were telling every class it was another tough day.
Right.
And I was mentally telling myself that people had said, well, day 3 is normally a really hard day. Day 4, they make it a little bit easier. So I was trying to tell myself, day 4, they want more people to finish. So it's going to be a hard day, but it probably isn't going to be as brutal as the other days. So that's kind of what I was telling myself.
And what, up to this point, we'll circle back to this. So let's talk about day 4. Like, what happened?
So it was, they told us it was going to be 114 Ks. So I was looking at my Ks ticking by a little bit. It turned out to be closer to 150. They lied big time. And we decided, Lance, Scott, and myself, that we were going to ride together for the last day because we wanted to get everyone through. That was our goal going in, to all finish. And it would have been terrible if one of us had got stuck somewhere and didn't make it, 2 of us going yeehaw and third person not happy, which slowed us down. And we've been told about this before. If somebody has a bobble and you stop to help them, then you're slowed down. If you then have a bobble and they stop to help you, you're compounding the mistakes. So it probably slowed us all down a little bit, but it got us all through. And I'm really glad we did it, because we rode all day together and we helped each other out at different points. And it was really nice to be riding with your buddies and getting through that final day.
That makes perfect sense to me, because I feel like what you undertook was bigger than the race itself. Like, 3 riding buddies that train together and ride together go to Romaniacs, and that, I think, is arguably a bigger deal than where you place in the race.
Yeah. I mean, I said before I went, I don't care if I'm 5th, 50th, or 150th. And as it turns out, I was a lot closer to 150th than the other two places. But we all finished within a couple of places of each other. But it doesn't matter. We all finished. That was the main thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool, man. I find it super interesting. So, like, looking back, the whole experience from like committing when you received the text, to the logistics, the booking, the travel, and then the event itself. What was the toughest part for you? Like, what were some of the real challenging things that you personally found?
Sounds funny, but we went for a warm-up ride a couple of days before we started. And there was a group of us with X Power, and we went off on this warm-up ride, and we riding through this little foresty place, and there was a log, and I heard one of the guys do a perfect double blip. I thought, okay, he's got some skills. Turns out he's a gold class rider, a guy from Brazil, super nice bloke. So the guys that were riding with us were good. So it kind of give you an indication that, okay, everyone's good here. No one's just, an average rider. They're all good riders. And we rode across a few hills and a few pastures, and then we went through this sort of screen of trees, and then there was this hill. And within about 30 seconds, the other riders were out of sight, and the 3 of us were struggling. I looped my bike out completely. The only time I did it the whole time in Romania. And all three of us are going, shit, what have we got ourselves into? This is a warm-up ride. We're not even into the event yet, and we're struggling on the very first hill we come to. My God.
Right.
So that was pretty tough. We got better through that day, through that warm-up ride, and we conquered some hills and we learned some stuff. But yeah, that was a bit of a shock. So that was hard. And then, the prologue was the prologue. It was a silly mistake, not a big deal. But yeah, day one, when I thought 4 days of this is going to be super tough. And I think we all kind of realized after day one and day two, definitely, that this was probably harder than we thought it was going to be. We knew it was going to be hard, but we didn't really understand how hard it was going to be. We didn't realize how close all three of us were going to get to maybe quitting, not being able to make it.
Yeah. When you talk to Scott, did they ever reveal to you that they were also having a difficult time and wondering if they were going to finish as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. After day two, when we had the hill, all three of us were on the verge there of thinking, I can't do this. Can I get up this hill? What happens if, how is this possible? I'm so tired. I'm so hot. I've tried this hill a couple of times and I'm not making it. You see people get to the top, almost to the very top, and then they make a mistake and they slide all the way to the bottom again.
It's crushing.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. We talked a lot about how we'd felt and what we were thinking.
Right. So what was tougher, the mental side or the physical side?
Ooh. I'd say probably the mental side, actually. Yeah. I didn't get to a point physically where I was collapsing. We passed a guy on the trail who I think it was day two, not long after the start, actually. So he must have had some tough spot somewhere, but the guy was lying on his back away from his bike. His camelback was off. His eyes were closed and he said, "Have you got any water? I need water." And we stopped and I picked up his camelback and it was heavy. He had water in his camelback, but he was so delirious he didn't figure it out. So we got him some water from his camelback and he came around a little bit. And then he said, okay. And he was telling us to carry on. And so we carried on to the next checkpoint and said, there's a guy back there who's in a bit of trouble. But I never got to that point. I didn't get to the point where I'm absolutely done. I can't lift my bike up anymore. But mentally, I think was the tough thing, was to tell yourself, just keep going, just keep moving, just keep going. Yeah.
So would you do it again?
I don't think I would. And the reason for that is, if I did it again, what's the best that could happen? The best that could happen with the same amount of training, the same amount of money put out, I might do a little bit better. Because I'd be familiar with all those things that were unfamiliar. You'd know about those. You'd understand how it all works. So you'd be a lot more comfortable in the environment.
Yep.
So I could maybe do a little bit better. So instead of being 140th, I might be 110th. So, a lot of investment for maybe not much improvement. And that's the best case. Worst case scenario, any one of those million things that happened on one of those 5 days, prologue and 4 days, goes wrong and you don't make it. And maybe that's negative thinking. I don't know. But if you did worse the second time, then what? You try and go back a third time? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's a very astute analysis of the future of yourself at Romaniacs. Like, I agree. Like, how much better do you expect to do realistically? But
Yeah.
man, the variables to not finish are so high, and a lot of them are out of your control.
I wrote something. I was making notes while I was doing it, and I'm just pulling it up. And I kind of summarized it up as it was an unrelenting series of what are you going to do now questions. Questions that test your character, your decision making under pressure, and the ability to deal with the immediate situation at hand while still keeping your eye on the long-term goal. And those questions often have an infinite number of wrong answers, ways it can go horribly wrong, and maybe just one correct solution that's going to get you a bit closer to the finish line. So yeah, that's how I kind of would sum it up. There's a million ways it can go wrong. Not that many ways you can thread that needle and get it right. So
Yep.
yeah, if it had rained, I
Good
don't
point.
even think I wouldn't have finished. I don't know. It would have been a different. It rained slightly on day one, and it slowed us down immeasurably, especially on the side hills with roots and grass. But I mean, they do change the course to take that into consideration. So the final day, they sent us up to a high meadow that they said it was only possible because it was dry. But yeah, as I say, there's so many variables. I mean, if I hadn't worked out how to get my bike going on day one, that would have been the end of day one. Done. If I hadn't made the hill on day two, so as I say, there's so many ways it could go wrong, and there's other things to do. There's other places to go.
Right. That's a good point. Just out of curiosity, what was the attrition rate? I don't even know if you know, but like of the 220 some that were in your class, how many DNF'd?
I don't know exactly. I'd have to go and look at the results. But quite a few. I mean, there was people who didn't make day one. And I think most people DNF'd either on day two or day four, because day two had the hill, and day four was a long, long day. I don't. To be honest, yeah, I didn't look at the results that hard.
Right.
I finished. That was all I needed.
So not finishing is a real thing. Like it's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I say, there's just so many ways that can happen. And it could be something out of your control. You could be going down a hill and a guy comes skidding into you from behind and knocks you off the course. That could happen. The bike, something could happen to the bike. When I tumbled my bike, I could have broken something that stopped it running. You could get lost. I mean, that's unlikely, but there have been conditions where the mist comes down and people get lost. Lots of ways it could go wrong, and not so many where you can get to the end. And as I say, for the three of us to finish, that was fantastic. We finished together, and that feeling of getting us all there to the finish line, which is what we all wanted to do. How do I top that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a high point and a memorable thing in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Those
the memories of individual incidents and the whole thing will stay with me forever. I mean, funny moment. I remember I was walking my bike down across a steep traverse, and my bike's kind of tucked under my elbow, and I'm like this, walking it down, and my front left bootstrap clicked. And they had on the bikes one of those all metal pipe guard and skid plates.
Yep.
And my boot clip hit that, came undone, and it got stuck in one of the holes in the pipe guard. And so now I'm precariously balanced on the side of this hill, 1 foot on the ground. I can't let go of the bike with my left hand because I couldn't reach. I've got my brake hold. I'm stuck. Well, and it's kind of funny. And Scott was behind me, and I went, Scott. He looked down, he could see what was going on. So he was trying to put his bike down really carefully so it didn't slide down the hill to come and help me and trying to get this clip out. And then as he was doing that, I managed to get it free. But just stupid stuff like that, just little moments, daft things that will stay with you. Yeah.
It's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thanks, Dallas.
Yeah, man. It's a big accomplishment. It's
Thank
like,
you.
it's a super satisfying thing, and I'm glad I'm part of it in some small way, in the sense that I've been watching you ride and been you've been coming to our events for a while, and to watch you guys go over and do Romaniacs is just spectacular, and complete it. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for putting that stuff on, which allows people like me to go and explore limits and go and try stuff in a ridiculously uncoordinated atmosphere.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that high compliment.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, your trips are fantastic.
They're meant to be unexpected.
Yeah. I love both trips that I've been on with Traction E-Rag. So absolutely.
Yeah, man. Maybe you'll be back out in British Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing. Hopefully people that tuned in or will listen to this recording in the future will get some insight into what it's like for, a weekend warrior, an average man to take the plunge, make the decision, and go over to Romaniacs and roll the dice, see how they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dallas. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, and yeah,
Pleasure
if people
talking
want
to
to
you.
contact me and have questions, by all means, I'll tell them a bunch of lies as well.
Yeah, Paul Hallett. And where can they find you, Paul? Facebook?
I lurk on Facebook under a pseudonym, but if they want to email me, paulhallett@yahoo.com, they can get hold of me like that.
Whoa, man, get ready for porn spam.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great.
If you guys also, you can contact us and we'll pass on Paul's information as well. But yeah, thank you again. I appreciate it. And yeah, we will talk again.
Yeah, thanks, Dallas. Look forward to
All
seeing
right.
you again sometime soon. Cheers.
See you, bye.
Bye.